female friends, I have mothers and fathers, and therefore what needs to happen in Kenyan society is the dichotomy of what we call female empowerment at the expense of the male child is not going to work. What we need is equality, and by equality I mean that society needs to get to a point where we don't laugh at a man who was beaten by his wife, and then we don't encourage a man who beats his wife. That's the challenge that needs to happen. But that said, we have not yet achieved equality for women, because there are women who were unable to sit for these exams because they got pregnant or things like that. So the pursuit for creating an equitable society for women must continue. But we must also be very clear that when we are seeing boys remaining at home, we need to ask ourselves, these boys who are remaining at home, who will build society with them other than them? So we need to balance our conversation. I think the gender wars, especially the ones I see on social media, need to stop. And we need to get to a point where we think of Kenya as a society where every member, male, female, Black, white, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, whatever it is, has equal opportunity and equal chance to succeed. And that's something that needs to become our mantra.
Okay, we'll definitely continue interrogating that. A lot of details in today's dailies. Make sure you grab yourself a copy and join the candidates in celebrating their performances. As we put this matter to rest, Professor Gitile Naituli, I'll start with you. I mean, it's definitely an ambitious goal and one that we definitely encourage. No candidate will miss a sport in the secondary school. But allow me to poke holes. I mean, there was an audit done in terms of the spaces in public and private schools, and those results were actually not disclosed on how many slots there are. Perhaps even as you mentioned earlier, you definitely are happy with the ministry's work this time round. Talk to us about this and that goal of inoculating all teachers and school staff to get the vaccine. There was a new directive that has been highlighted today.
Yes, I think the inoculation need to go on. It's a good thing. We need to trust in science, because these teachers will be exposed to these youngsters who, even when they get the COVID, then they don't get down the way their teachers would. So that's a very good idea. In terms of our investment in education, we miss them both somewhere. You see, you look at the way they do it in Europe. I'm quite familiar with the Swedish school system. Mm-hmm. They share facilities. There is no strict division between the primary, secondary, and the university. That way, it's able to pull the resources together. Particularly did some work with the Shamas, University of Science and Technology, and you find the vice chancellor in that university is also the headmaster of the local primary school, and so there is integration. That way, we can utilize our assets properly to enhance the children. So the other is really the balance also between the genders, between the girls and the boys. Yeah. If you are not careful, we could end up into what I saw as Caribbean situation in 2009, and give a public lecture at University of Jamaica in Kingston on education for sustainable development. In that university, 97% of students are female. So you ask the question, where is the boys? So we need to retrace our steps. We create this imbalance so we can have a balanced society.
Okay, well, balance is quite important. Kasim Tandaza, as you give us your final take, I mean, page 5 of the Standard highlights the Coast private schools that have posted impressive performance yet again, as 50,805 girls actually sat for the exams from that particular region. Talk to us about that. But even as you add, I mean, there's a lot ongoing, not just in the private level, rather the primary level. The tertiary institutions, the universities, are set to undergo an audit, bearing in mind the IMF loan that came through in terms of reconstructing the staff in the universities. But not just that, with the implementation of CBC, we definitely need a lot of focus on the courses that are given by these universities. What's your take on this?
One, that is expected. And that's why I said what the CS said about public schools doing better than private schools, according to me, on the ground, is not true. And of course, for somebody to sit a national exam, examined, basically backed, more or less done with a Nairobi mindset, the private schools are better equipped, and therefore they have to do better. For some of us who are legislators, especially from rural constituencies, we know that better, that there is no way a student sitting under a tree with no desk, let alone thinking of a smartphone to do some revision online and whatever, can compete with such a student. That one would have been expected. Two, the issue of girls now doing better than boys. I think it's a question of the facilities again. I'm quite sure if you go to those rural constituencies, if they were to do special audit in terms of performance of rural constituencies, definitely boys will be more and they will be doing much better. Because like in my constituency, there are those constituencies which highly the girl child is still very much disadvantaged. And I've taken steps personally, and believe most of us have taken that step to see whether we can put some dormitories specifically for girls. And it has even proved in my constituency that where I've done that, the performance for girls has improved. That means they are suffering a lot compared to the boy child. The issue of 100% transition, again, I appeal to the CS to relook some of the policies that he has put, because currently we are not supposed to start any new secondary schools. That is good in terms of sharing facility, as Prof had initially said. But in a situation where one secondary school to the next is over 7 kilometers, then definitely you cannot really say you are going to achieve 100% transition, especially when you are focusing on the girl child. We end up with the problems which everybody knows of now, borders and whatever, and the early pregnancies. There's so much that can happen as somebody tries to trek 7 kilometers and ultimately 14 by going and coming back. So the CS, for us to achieve 100% transition, especially for rural constituencies, there are some policies which certainly apply very well in Nairobi and town center. But when it comes to rural, I think those policies need to be relooked at so that somehow we can balance and bring these other kids at par.
Okay, that's well noted.
Yes.
Okay, allow me to converse with Mark Bichachi just briefly in terms of the implementation and the rollout of CBC, because we definitely have to look forward. A lot of emphasis has been put, and Magoha just yesterday expressed confidence in the progress of the CBC that is now being implemented up to grade 4. A couple of changes were announced. Grade 5 will be rolled out by the end of the year, but the Education Ministry officials have their job cut out for them. Well, what say you about some of the challenges the rollout of the CBC has faced so far, even as we push for this new curriculum?
Well, you see, the thing is that change is always hard to implement, especially given the fact that we're a developing country and the infrastructure, as Kasim as well put, is lacking. However, the CBC is the way to go, because one of the things that it does is it trains students based on what capabilities and capacities they have. And this is a critical shift because, as you know, companies as big as Google have decided that they're not going to require to is your skill and talent that might get you a very lucrative job within Google. And as the world is developing and as the job market is changing, we need more versatile students coming out of our institutions than we currently do. Now, what is required, in my view, I agree with Professor Naituli when he speaks about shared facilities. I happen to have grown up within the locale of a university, Egerton University, and I remember going to the library when I was as little as class 6. I remember going to the dairy that was there to learn about cultures and Bache. And that was a privilege that I had, not because my parents were the wealthiest there, but because it was a facility that was available. And these are the same things that we need to do. We need to make our institutions of learning, instead of barricading them and closing them from each other, to create co-learning situations where students can go into the university and actually see what engineering looks like before they go there. So we need to innovate and we need to integrate. The other innovation that we might need very soon is, once we demolish the walls of national versus provincial schools and things like that, the school next to Kasim's house and the school next to Oroba, where she is in Kisii, should have the same standard. So the mother who gives birth in Kisii does not aspire to St. George's in Nairobi, that the school next to them is good enough. And then we can do something which I hope can happen, is we can close these boarding schools that are training this gender segregation that we are talking about, because we have more and more people coming out of these schools who did class and tuition the entire life, and they don't know how to relate to each other.
Right.
So we need to innovate, we need to create the future where we have a more integrated, cooperative education system.
Well, that definitely is the goal. And as I mentioned earlier, the work is cut out for the Education Ministry officials to actually roll out successfully the CBC curriculum. Let's shift focus, gentlemen and lady, over to health matters right now. And it has been highlighted in the Daily today. New dates for second dose of India sits on COVID vaccines, rather, where a member of the Vaccine Advisory Task actually informed us that they opted to administer the second jab 12 weeks after the first dose and not 8 as previously planned, rather, due to various issues around India, which imposed an export ban on AstraZeneca vaccine. Gloria, I'd like to start with you briefly, your quick reply on this, because we've seen the move in terms of the private sector being given a leeway to import the vaccines. Just recently, the Sputnik 5 vaccine, according to the headlines, will be exported out of the country, at least due to the blanket ban right here in the country. What say you about this?
I think we are literally shooting ourselves in the foot, because at the end of the day, Justy, what we should be aiming at is that the population of Kenya, 50 million, should have been vaccinated, whether by the Russian vaccine or otherwise. In fact, when I read a lot of these comments where people are saying, you know, this is the preferred vaccine, this is that, according to science, which is what we are following now, is that we have a variety of vaccines. And the only thing that is happening, and I believe we are trying to do, is to monopolize another industry. We are trying to ensure, and when I say we, I mean those who are actually benefiting from the import of a certain vaccine, of one particular vaccine that we are endorsing. We are trying to monopolize an industry and make money out of a situation where we could actually open that industry, and by that industry I mean the vaccine. We could open that industry and say, listen, the point here is to make sure that our population, at least 80% of it, is vaccinated. Now, whether they are vaccinated by whichever vaccine, our aim here is to ensure that we are dealing with the pandemic by ensuring everybody is vaccinated. Now, there's a lot of talk about, now let me ask you actually, Justin, when we are saying as a country that we have these vaccines that are in the country, which have been proven by science and statistics and other countries that are using it, that it actually works. We have it within our country. Probably the right steps were not taken in terms of approvals through the boards and things like that, but we have the vaccine in the country. Now, instead of looking at how we can safely administer that vaccine, either for free or by charging a fee, we are actually saying, no, because of the regulations that we are placing, we are going to export this because we do not want our people to use this vaccine, not because of any scientific reason, but because of politicizing a medical situation. So for me, when we are talking about how we are going to deal with this pandemic effectively and how we are going to have a life after COVID-19, really, we should stop politicizing the fact that we have a variety of vaccines. Yesterday, I had the deputy president speak and say that he was able to afford 7,000 to pay for the vaccine. So why should he actually go and get the free one and take up someone else's space?
Right.
And I tried to understand that, and I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense, because if we are queuing at government facilities, millions, thousands of us queuing to get that free vaccine, surely, if I can afford 50 shillings or 1,000 or 7,000 to go and get a vaccine in an alternative place, the aim here is not how I get it. The aim is to ensure that all 50 million Kenyans actually are vaccinated. So I think politicizing this, trying to make a situation really that isn't, at the end of the day, you can be sure just in the next 4 to 5 months, we are going to have more than one vaccine in this market, and the private industry is going to capitalize on it. So it's really just a matter of time.
Well, it definitely is a matter of time, but bearing in mind the politicization of the vaccine is not just in Kenya, it's been noted the world over. But Professor, I mean, the Gavi COVAX facility is responsible for supplying to perhaps third world countries like Kenya at a subsidized rate. Bearing in mind the clamor for vaccine, what say you about talk of Africa actually spearheading its own vaccine due to the challenges we've noted right now? And unfortunately, third world countries might actually affect Africa a little bit more as compared to the other continents. Talk to us about this.
I think that would be a very good idea. That we are able to manufacture, because you know there's formulas already, so setting up a manufacturing facility and they're able now to get out those doses. I think I want to agree with the last speaker. Given our economic constraints, I think it's good to allow, with of course the government has a responsibility, because vaccine is a public good. So the government has a responsibility to make sure that we get the right vaccine. You can't take that right away from the government. At the same time, given our constraints, the government needs to allow those people with strict supervision so that they don't bring us water here. Because you know the way we are just a very interesting people. With the strict supervision, other private people shouldn't be allowed, because the idea here is to vaccinate as many people as practically possible towards acquiring herd immunity. So I saw Rwanda trying to team up with somebody, and in Kenya we could have done it very easily, because if you remember, the AstraZeneca was actually developed here with Oxford. Yeah. So Kemure should have been empowered to start the process of manufacturing these vaccines, so that we know we are relying entirely on donations. And that is why opening up the space to allow private actors may be a very good idea, but let me emphasize that with the strict government supervision.
Strict government supervision, and at times that's the missing link, bearing in mind the recent scandals that have bedeviled the health sector. But let's shift focus. Be that as it may, a lot of news covered on the dailies, and I'd like to start with you, Kasim Tandaza, because members of parliament were actually shocked as valuation report of the SGR land payment vanished. Just a little bit of information here. Valuation report used by the government agency to pay 12.1 billion to acquire land for the SGR mysteriously went missing. That's according to the NLC acting CEO. And remember, the acquisition of the land, which was done by NLC on behalf of Kenya Railways Corporation, was flagged in a special audit report by the Auditor General Nancy Gathungu. What's your take on this? Because we've just talked about implementation issues, and this seems to actually show the issues at hand, especially when it comes to matters managing finances, public funds especially.
Jesse, I'm surprised that you are using the word shock, because according to me, unfortunately, and I'm repeating this 10 times, unfortunately, our new normal now is corruption. And apparently, it seems there's nothing that can be done about it. And I've put this one squarely over and over again on the CEO of this country, on the head of state. Can he please stop this? To me, it is actually madness. Why should we be shocked? about the evaluation report just vanishing when, just I think about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were, the parliament, the committee was investigating the issue of KEMSA and whatever, the COVID millionaires, and somebody comes there and says she cannot remember the bank account, she cannot remember the signatories, and after that, somebody just walks away and a report is done and nothing is done. So this normal of corruption, not just on SGR and any other. And we are now, as the professor had just intimated, let's hope that even this vaccine does not turn out to be another scandal in making. Remember, I don't think it has even been put open by the concerned ministry whether the doses we got. My assumption is that it has been a grant. But if we were to pay something, how much would it be? If we paid, how much is it? You know, that type of disclosures that should come before people start speculating and actually doubting the whole process. So this monster of corruption, where even when cases are taken to court, they never end. Can we please, now that in the BBI there's an element on a time frame in terms of corruption cases, be passed, and that one also be given a priority in terms of implementation. Otherwise, our new normal on corruption is very sad. It's going to bring this country down. Ultimately, it's going to be very chaotic in this country, but the right person to deal with this issue is the CEO of this country. We are seeing it in our neighboring countries where the CEO is firm on it. Definitely, there is a reduction, but in Kenya, it's business as usual. Unfortunately.
Well, okay, Mark Bichachi, your take on this. Does the buck stop with the president, executive? I mean, many people have pointed fingers at various arms of government in this fight against corruption, the judiciary included, perhaps parliament as well, more towards the issues bedeviling us surrounding the debt issue. Are these three arms of government actually doing their best to ensure reining in on various issues surrounding corruption?
Let's start here. The failure of this particular case starts where? Let's remember that the former chairman was indicted. And when he was indicted, he was taken, there was a ruling that allowed him to go back to office and continue to function. In the process of him functioning, you will remember that there was a robbery, and I put it in very big air quotes, where computers and other items of the Land Commission were stolen. The moment those things were stolen, we knew that this day was coming. So let me put it to my countrymen in perspective. Number one, the corruption in this country is perpetuated by every single institution and person in the chain who refused to act. The judge who decided that criminals can go back, suspected criminals, let me correct myself, can go back to the office and did not think that these people would take the action of making sure they bury all the evidence, that judge was wrong and is wrong. Secondly, the people who decided that the person who said the reports have disappeared, he should also be taken into custody for the simple reason that, number one, if you can't find documents, you can find the people who sat in that meeting and you can reconstruct what happened. So the process of getting to the truth should never stop. But Bwana Kasim, I'd like to also remind you that Parliament also has a role. And what is the role? It is not just to oversight the executive.
Okay.
Parliament also has the obligation to pass rules and regulations that should make it more difficult for such things to happen. The reason that we don't move forward is that Parliament and parliamentarians usually say, oh, the buck doesn't stop with us. The debt issue, ask the president. The corruption issue, ask the president. What does Parliament do other than say we should ask the president?
All right.
Parliament actually has the capacity to recall a president. So this is a system-wide failure. And as a society, as a country, we need to get to the point where such things cannot happen.
Okay. Okay, Kasim Tandaza, I'll give you a right of reply later on because there's one more story that definitely needs highlighting. Just hold on to your thought kindly. Gloria, briefly, IEBC plans to buy new tech to manage the 2022 general election, and the new system features actually shows an attempt by IEBC to right the wrongs that led to the Supreme Court nullification of the 2017 general election. The Commission, according to the dailies, has already advertised a tender for the procurement of an elections management system. I don't know, but history, if I can remember correctly, KIEMS was actually controversially acquired. What say you about this move?
I think we are just, we are spendthrifts as a country. We are just looking for any opportunity to spend. The fact that IEBC is saying that they are now going to buy another system to right the wrongs that might have happened in the past elections. The first thing is, up till today, the servers have never been opened. So that was not a technical error. That was not a system failure. That was actually a human error, a decision by a human being. We are saying we are not going to open the servers. So the only thing that IEBC should be purchasing is integrity. At the end of the day, we as a country, as at June 2020, we are on 6.69 trillion in terms of debt. We just borrowed 230-something billion to deal with the pandemic, apparently, and actually boost these state agencies that are running losses. We are now at a point where people are actually just eager. We have 15 months. These people who've been appointed, these people who are actually in office, are just eager to loot whatever is left of this country. For me, if you ask me, IEBC does not have a problem with the system. IEBC does not have a shortage of resources in terms of technical, digital resources. What we lack at IEBC is integrity. What we lack at IEBC is proper transparency of the systems that are already in place.
Okay.
What we lack at IEBC actually is proper leadership. So at the end of the day, this is just going to end up, and if you ask, going to end up like another scandal, like the managed equipment services scandal, which at the end of the day, as Mark Bichache has said, the Senate actually put out a report of that, the mess scandal, and in that report, you could literally go and make certain arrests, but that report was shelved. Now we are looking at NLC actually losing their valuation report. So at the end of the day, it's not about systems. It's not about that we don't have processes. We actually don't even need the Building Bridges initiative to put people accountable in terms of corruption.
Okay.
What we need is the goodwill of our CEO of this country, of the president, to actually use the instruments of power that he has at his disposal to ensure that we have arrests and to ensure that judiciary has been facilitated enough so that they can be able to carry out cases to the point that they will have conviction. That's what we don't need new systems. Yeah.
Okay, that's definitely your take. Professor Gitile Naituli, 1 minute kindly. Talk to us about this new plan to buy the new system as we approach the 2022 election.
Well, I think I can't comment on that because I don't know why they are planning to buy a new one. But I want to say this. The moment the Kenyan government decides that it doesn't want corruption in this country, that day the corruption will end.
Well, I definitely need to be intentional with the moves to end the corruption scourge in the country. Allow us to take a short break. When we come back, we get into the week in review. It's definitely been a busy week. We'll engage more on the search for the next Chief Justice as it is day 5 of interviewing by the Judicial Service Commission. We'll take a look at the journey so far, even as we expect more candidates to align as from 9 a.m. today. Not just that, we'll take a look at the latest moves in politics. It seems Raila is the new quote-unquote political bride. So much clamor around him. Is he a king or a kingmaker? And we'll also factor in the remarks by the Deputy President just yesterday. Do stay with us.